Okay, we're ready to start Joash surviving overwhelming responsibility. This is day 2 that we're going over today. So be ready to pause to write these down. I'm going to give you a little timeline so that you can see where Joash fits into the whole scheme of things. Timeline we're looking at all began with creation, the story of Adam and Eve. That was then followed in Genesis chapter 7 when we had Noah and the destruction of the flood. From that, our third one is the families descending from Noah. God chooses Abraham to be the family channel for Christ, and that is the remainder pretty much of the Old Testament, which traces the history of a nation called Israel. Then we go into the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All those who Jacob was renamed Israel. His 12 sons, who Joseph was one of them. These are all patriarchs, which leads us to our fifth bullet point, which is Moses, who led the children of Israel from Egypt back to Canaan, the homeland. After Moses, there was Joshua, who led during the resettlement of Canaan. He was followed by the 13 judges, of whom Samuel was the last. After Joshua, you had all the clamoring going on for a king to be named, so Samuel anointed Saul. Next was David, and then his son Solomon. So if you need to pause to write this down, got a couple more to finish the timeline to see where Joash fits in. Okay, after you had Solomon's reign, which then led into the 10 tribes in the north and the 2 tribes of the south, which were Judah. By that time, this is when Joash comes onto the picture, and he is the 7th king in the south. The north, which is still called Israel then, has had 11 kings, and most of them were all pretty much evil, with only a few of them who had committed to the Lord. Various prophets had warned against harsh judgment in response to the sins of the nation of the 2 nations of Israel. Elijah is a prophet who challenges Ahab and Jezebel and the prophets of Baal, and Ahab is Joash's grandfather, which leads me to where I'm going to give you a little bit of a family tree so you can see where Joash fits in. Okay, when we get to the family line here, we have Ahab and Jezebel have a daughter named Athaliah. Athaliah has a son named Ahaziah, who has a son named Joash, and that's where we're going to pick up our story today. Jezebel being the grandmother, she had a lot of pagan. She was brought up under pagan practices. So before Joash becomes king, the country had many years of this Baal influence. So every time the kingdoms of Judah and Israel turned to Baal worship, they had to be punished. So what you guys are going to do is we're going to pass out. This story is told twice in the Bible. It's told in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. And we're going to split it up. You're going to draw a picture. It doesn't have to be fancy artwork. You're going to do just your best, even if you use stick figures, to tell the story of what you draw. From the hat, from the great Bible hat. When you pull out, draw your picture. At the end of class, we're going to try to pair up with who you're with, the story you're with, and then in the last slide, so you can pause here, the last slide I will summarize the story. Okay, hope you guys have had some time now to get your pictures drawn. Hope you got a good laugh at each other's artwork. Just kidding. I want to give you a quick summary of everything that's going on so that we can kind of figure out the story. We have Athaliah, who has influenced her husband to kill all his family, including his grandkids, so that she could have the throne. So Joash was rescued by his aunt and hidden away by her husband as well, who was the high priest Jehoiada. And then you have Athaliah. Now she's going to rule for 6 years. So they've hidden him away for 6 years, and they raise him. And you got to imagine, with him being a high priest, he was raised with those godly influence. Remember, we had talked about Jezebel being under a lot of pagan influences when she grew up. So that's what shaped her thinking. So you can see Joash now, as he turns 7 years old, he has that godly instincts that has been taught to him. So when he's 7 years old, he is crowned the king. So now Athaliah, she was not happy with this at all. As she comes to try to stop it, she's executed outside the temple gates. So now you have Joash, this young guy, he is faced with this overwhelming responsibility. So he had to remove all those influences of Baal that were around, all that worship from the land, so that the Lord could be worshipped. So you can imagine that's a pretty tough task, especially for a young boy. His second big responsibility that was kind of overwhelming was for him to rebuild the temple. And so even after he ordered the work, the priest stole the offerings, and the work was delayed, and it was delayed over 23 years. So you can imagine, at trying to accomplish that task, all the trouble he had. So that's where we kind of want to pick up our story next week. Hope you guys have been minding Miss McGinnis well and doing what you're supposed to do so that you can watch the movie. Otherwise, I feel sorry for you, because that busy work's not pretty. Hope you guys have a great week. Hope you continue to pray for everybody on the mission trip. That the Lord will work on the Hondurans' hearts as well as our hearts. You guys have a blessed day. Have a great rest of the week too. Take care.